לחיים, 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 לחיים.
This is the story of Ziggy Landschaft and his miraculous journey to survival and a new life. Ziggy is a beloved member of the MacDonald Shul in Netanya, where, when possible, he comes every morning to the tefillah. Ziggy has been very reluctant to draw public attention to himself and never gave talks or interviews. Gradually, he has shared parts of his traumatic story with close family living in England. To the grandchildren in particular, when they've asked him about his past, he has opened up more. We were fortunate to receive important materials, interviews, and many family pictures. Much thanks to Ziggy's daughters, Leah Berman and Jackie Landschaft, for their extensive support. And finally, we immersed ourselves in the history surrounding Ziggy's life in order to better understand him within that context. So, what was the secret of his survival? What innate qualities helped him triumph? A quote from Ta'anit 20b is enlightening. One should always be as flexible as a reed and not as unyielding as a cedar. Yes, Ziggy was transplanted from a sheltered, comfortable family life to life in a ghetto, 3 concentration camps, and a forced death march. This is how he spent 6 years of his youth. Ultimately, he survived and thrived. We learned from his daughters that Ziggy in his later years was an avid chess player and won championships in local tournaments. Those innate qualities which might have helped him survive are the same qualities which led him to be a chess champion. His roles shifted, sometimes pawn, sometimes player, ultimately a triumphant winner. 13 moves towards rebirth. The miraculous survival of Ziggy Landschaft against all odds. These are the qualities of a chess champion. Ambition. Chess is an individual game. In order to succeed, a player must want it with all his heart. Patience. One must have patience, not only over the board, but also in the chess journey. Strong character. Many good players don't go up to the next level because they lack either ambition or a strong character that leads their way up. Fighting spirit. The will to win is critical and one characteristic that not everyone has. Adaptation. Champions have the ability to adapt quickly to difficult situations and overcome the problems that could arise. They won't accept defeat. Winning is everything. Nothing distracts him. Ziggy's life's journey is marked by resilience. He personifies Dr. Viktor E. Frankl's, the famed psychiatrist imprisoned in Auschwitz, observation. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Ziggy wonders whether the Holocaust will be remembered, and he questions whether telling his story will have any impact on the anti-Semitism that has raged for thousands of years. Listen to his message.
My experience in my life, I would be surprised if what you're doing would be very successful. The fact is that we not liked in the non-Jewish world. Nothing what you will do or what you will want to do will change it. In 2,000 years it hasn't improved, and I doubt very much if the next 100 or 200 years will make much change.
Young people might learn something from your story?
Possibly, but in my opinion, very few, not many.
The war years have left their mark. Ziggy says he now eats very quickly because he still has the feeling that someone might steal his food. He hates queuing because in the past this has led to horrible circumstances. So let us review Ziggy's life in 13 moves, winning the battle. Starting point, Chorzów. The foundation for Ziggy's life was set in Chorzów, Königshütte, a town about an hour's drive from Krakow. Chorzów used to be one of the most important cities in the largest Polish economic area, the Upper Silesian Industry Area, with extensive industry in coal mining, steel, chemistry, manufacturing and energy sectors. Chorzów is a town that was home to many Jews before the war and had a strong German influence. Ziggy says the town was modern and well integrated. Religious observance was traditional, but not especially strict, following kosher food laws and celebrating the Sabbath and festivals. He was born Zygmunt Landschaft, Zelig, on August 1st, 1925, into a thriving upper-middle-class family. It consisted of his father Chaim, his mother Liebe, and his brother Meir, 2 years younger. Blonde Meir could pass as an Aryan. The brothers were close. An extended family of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins provided a warm, happy environment for family visits, Jewish holidays, outings, and extended vacations. It was a charmed life. They lived in a large, elegant, sumptuously decorated apartment, part of the sophisticated city centre. They even had the luxury, for those times, of a full bathroom. They also had a large smart car and chauffeur, Koppel, who was a half-brother to Ziggy's father. You'll hear more about him later. The family business, called Fortuna, consisted of a thriving wholesale grocery warehouse owned by his parents in partnership with an uncle. Ziggy remembers his parents' business.
It was called Fortuna. All I remember, herrings, flour, soap, things like that. I used to go to the business sometimes. We had stables, horses, and open wagons. And I remember the fellows carrying sacks of flour, loading on the platforms, and 2 horses to each wagon, each for 2 horses.
Ziggy attended a Jewish primary school and secular high school. Ziggy remembers his school life.
I went to Jewish school. The primary was Jewish school. Yeah. Mixed girls and boys. The teachers that I remember were female. I can't remember male teacher. Math, languages, we learned German and French and Polish, of course, and history and grammar, geography, the usual subjects that are taught in the. That's when I had bar mitzvah, I probably finished the school, the primary school, and started. And it was when the war broke out. I was 4.
His parents were kind and community-minded. His mother, in addition to managing the household and helping in the business, was a member of Jewish ladies' charitable organizations. These helped many refugees who began to come into Poland as World War II drew close. Ziggy remembers family life to have been happy and settled until the war. He does not remember experiencing anti-Semitism in his daily life before the war. Ziggy did, however, notice more German Jews moving to their town from Germany from around 1933. The fate of Ziggy's hometown Chorzów during the war. Fortunately, the Landschafts had taken note of the dark clouds gathering, and they made their move earlier in 1939. It was the beginning of a long, treacherous journey. As in some chess games, the moves begin slowly. The first move was to Michał. The Landschafts left their home in Chorzów and travelled 87 kilometres east to the town of Michał. Ziggy's father had been born there and had other family who lived in that area. There was an organised, well-established, sizable Jewish community. They lived there during the early occupation. Although Ziggy's formal schooling had ended, he stayed productive by continuing to develop printing skills picked up in previous school holidays in the family printing firm. In those days, printing was a very manual, labour-intensive process. This would serve him well later. The second move was to the Krakow ghetto. The German army occupied Krakow in Poland in September 1939. In March 1941, the Germans ordered the establishment of a ghetto in Krakow. Polish Jews are forced to move into the Krakow ghetto. By late 1941, there were some 18,000 Jews imprisoned in the Krakow ghetto. Things were changing quickly in Poland. They were no longer safe. Ziggy recalls that by 1940, the Germans had taken over. Everyone had to wear a Star of David so they could easily be identified as a Jew. He and his direct family were transported by train with others to the Krakow ghetto. He was 15. Life there was very difficult. The Landschafts lived in one room in an apartment in the ghetto. There was a family crowded into each room of the apartment. Ziggy remembers that conditions were not good. Religion faded from his life. Gone was prayer and celebration of religious festivals. Ziggy did learn to speak Yiddish there. Food was scarce. The family, ever resourceful, cut out an exit in the barbed wire part of the wall. Meyer, 13, who could pass for an Aryan, went out to find bread and other basic food in Krakow, the town. At great risk, Meyer smuggled food under his clothes. He was so successful that his parents were able to make a small living by selling the smuggled goods on the black market. Everyone was expected to work in the ghetto. Ziggy remembered the printing skills he had learned and became a printer. Plastchov army camp was nearby, just over the bridge and in parkland. The men and boys were sent to work there daily to convert the camp. Eventually, the forced labor camp was ready for habitation. Liebe, Ziggy's mother, regularly went shopping for food in the ghetto. Sadly, one day she did not return. Observers witnessed her being shot. And then there were 3. The board begins to empty. The third move was to Plastchov, forced labor camp. The noose was tightening. Ziggy, his father and brother were moved to Plastchov in 1943 when Ziggy was 18. This forced labor camp, one of the largest, was made famous by the film Schindler's List. The notorious commandant was the bestial, sadistic Amon Goeth. He viewed Jews as vermin to be exterminated. There was a lime quarry nearby. Much of the labor involved quarrying and factory work. The daily food ration for each person was 200 grams of bread, 150 grams of cheese, 300 grams of coffee substitute, and hot water soup. Ziggy says that daily life for him was not excessively controlled at the beginning. They still had some contact with the ghetto, and so had food and money from Meyer's continued activities in Krakow. They were risking death if caught, but that is how some people got through. Ziggy learned to stay under the radar, limit his exposure. This emerged as a common pattern in survivors, and often stayed with them throughout their lifetimes. Ziggy about life in Plaszow.
Then I worked in the printing. Because I knew a little bit of printing. We were already in Plaszow without my mother. My mother disappeared in ghettos. She disappeared. She went out to do some shopping, never came back. So in the Plaszow we were only for three of us. My father and I and my brother.
The fourth move was to Gross Rosen concentration camp. Ziggy, his father and brother were placed on a 315-kilometer trip in cattle trucks to the Gross Rosen concentration camp in Germany. Travel in cattle trucks was horrendous. There was nowhere to sit, no food, no water, no fresh air, no provisions for sanitation aside for one bucket. The stench of urine and excrement was overwhelming. Under these conditions, people died on the journey. They stayed until the winter of 1945. Ziggy remembers Gross Rosen.
Brother and I, we had in the ghetto. We had a nice little business. So we saved some money. So we were buying dollars. And we had I can't remember how many, not a big deal, but $200-300 we had. And when we took us to go to Gross Rosen, so we shown it into my brother's truck.
In Plaszow, he had used the money for bribes, and he attempted to do the same here. Unfortunately, the Germans discovered it and punished them by assigning them to heavy, treacherous work. Though not originally designed to be a death camp, exhausting 12-hour work in the quarry, starving rations of food, lack of proper medical care, incessant maltreatment caused a high mortality rate. Ziggy saw many die. The dead were just thrown into holes in the ground. By January 1945, Chaim, his father, physically exhausted, passed away in the barracks one night. Ziggy remembers. This was the first time he cried during the war. The losses mount. Now there are two.
We were all together. My father passed away over there. He had a stroke. He died in my arms.
The fifth move was the death march to Mauthausen. The chessboard is emptying. The losses increase. For Ziggy, this was the middle of a bitter, cold and snowy winter. The prisoners only had their pyjama camp clothes, and many, including Ziggy, did not have shoes. He suffers from breathing complaints and chilblains to this day. Already sick after months or years of violence and starvation, prisoners were marched to train stations, transported for days at a time without food or shelter in open freight trains, then forced to march again at the other end to the new camp. Ziggy remembers walking with his brother Meir. Occasionally, they were put on cattle trucks. They stopped to sleep in the open air. No one was allowed to support anyone else. There was virtually no food or rest. If they fell or lagged behind, they were shot. Most prisoners died on the 580-kilometer journey. Only a few hundred men survived. Exhausted and in rags, they arrived on March 3rd. The sixth move was to subcamp Ebensee. Ziggy and Meir were taken to a subcamp called Ebensee. Prisoners constructed tunnels for never realized rocket armament. Meir was ill. He was taken to the sanatorium, never to be seen again. He died at the age of 18 on May 3rd. A few days later, the Americans liberated the camp. And then there was one. Ziggy's on the passing of his brother.
To Mauthausen, I was together with my brother. Only we were separated in that Mauthausen. I don't know what happened there. My brother passed away somehow, I don't know. Yeah.
By this time, people were just left to their own devices, without food. They starved in large numbers. Ziggy connected with a group of Czech political prisoners.
And I only survived because this Czechs, I don't know if they were communists or why they were in concentration camp. They were non-Jews, and they saved my life. They had a bit more food than what we were getting, and they shared a bit food with me and helped me.
They helped him maintain what little strength he had left. They could feel the end of the war was approaching, and they decided to escape. The group dug a tunnel under the fence, and on May 6th, escaped under the wire. Ironically, this was the date the Americans liberated the camp.
But the whole time we were there was less than 2 months. It was already April, nearly May, near the end of the war. But all the Gestapo, all the Germans that were running the camp ran away. And when it became so chaotic, so they said, we're not staying, we're going. You're coming with us. I still went with them. We went into some woods or something, and they were shooting, and I got the next thing I remember, I woke up in the hospital. That's all.
Liberation, the day they for so long all hoped and prayed for. US forces under the command of General Omar Bradley reached the Ebensee forced labor camp in Austria in early May 1945. The Germans had built Ebensee at the foot of the Austrian Alps as part of the Mauthausen system of camps. Ziggy was shot through the back of his neck and his thigh. The next thing he remembers was waking up in a hospital. The liberators had rescued him. He had survived, just barely. While in hospital for 3 weeks, Ziggy was nursed back to good health. Fortunately, the doctors understood that he must only be fed small amounts of food until he could eat normally again. Sadly, many Holocaust survivors were fed too much by well-intentioned liberators, and their stomachs burst. On reception to the hospital, Ziggy weighed only 48 kilos. An average weight for a healthy male of his age and height would be 74 kilos, approximately 163 pounds. The seventh move brought him to Italy, to Santa Maria di Bagni, the camp for displaced persons. Ziggy was placed in a displaced persons camp in a small village near the foot of Italy called Santa Maria di Bagni, under the management of the United Nations Refugee Agency. Here, he had to begin figuring out what he would do with the rest of his life. Where is my family? The eighth move brought him to Munich to find family. Ziggy is 21. After a period, he heard there were places to reunite with lost family who might have survived. He travelled to Munich, a town in Germany where there were records and a centre for assisting in research, later to become the International Tracing Service. Amazingly, on his way, he met up with Koppel on the same train. They discovered that few of their close family had survived. Some had moved to Israel. Ziggy decided to return to Chorzów to sell his property, the ninth move. Ziggy and Koppel decided to return to Chorzów. There, they sold the family investment property called Fortuna for what Ziggy describes as peanuts. Ziggy had to make a decision where to restart his life. He moved to Israel, his 10th move. After 4 transitional years of searching and healing, travelling between Germany and France, Ziggy made his next move. He travelled to Israel. Though it was difficult to get permission to enter, he was allowed in as he had no other family or place to go. However, once there, he was concerned that he would be expected to join the army. He did not want to be conscripted into the Israeli army. He had seen enough of fighting. He had seen enough of death. The timing for a life in Israel was not yet right. He stayed there approximately 10 months. Ziggy's 11th move was to meet a cousin, which he met, but he also met his future wife. Next stop, Paris, where Ziggy had a cousin. Here he met his future wife in a language school. Their romance developed quickly. Renia Zuckerman, pronounced Zuckerman, was born in 1932 in Tarnogrod, Poland. Her family were working people, very Zionistic and intellectual. Ziggy decided to move to England, Ziggy's 12th move. His new life begins in 1951 at the age of 26. He followed his future wife, who moved to London to be with her parents. They married September 23, 1951. Ziggy's new life began. They raised a family of 3 daughters and were close to his wife's parents. Ziggy played an active part of the Jewish community in London. He was well liked and a regular Shul goer. They travelled regularly to Israel to connect with people they knew and who had survived. He was also a very involved parent, pushing his girls to excel. Success at all costs. You remember? Winning is everything. Eventually, Ziggy established a successful wholesale furrier business, which he called Fortuna Furs, after the Chorzów property. He spent most of his spare time as an avid chess player, participating in chess clubs and advancing to bigger and better games. He even participated in correspondence chess. He morphed into a chess champion. The qualities of a chess champion served him well in creating his new life. He said, "Whatever comes, I'm dealing with it." Another quality that helped him is a certain level of detachment. He looks at the war years as another world, like a film. I never look behind. Settling in Israel was Ziggy's 13th move, and winning. He won the game. Ziggy retired and he and his wife moved to Israel. Ziggy was 63. They settled in North Netanya. Despite his advanced age and health condition allowing, he regularly drives with his electric cart to the Shachrit morning service of McDonald Shul. Always on time, always sitting at the same seat in the first row next to the door. Part of the daily ritual which keeps him moving forward is his secret to a long life. When the service is over, he enjoys a glass of whiskey together with his Shul friends. We wish him good health, and may he continue to look forward to his daily glass of whiskey, to keeping him going until 120. L'chaim!
L'chaim, 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 l'chaim.
שהכל יהיה בדברו.